So picture a summer afternoon. The sun is just beating down, the air is incredibly thick with dust, and all around you you're hearing this deafening roar of tens of thousands of men screaming.
Right, just pure chaos.
Exactly. But you aren't just hearing a battle. You are witnessing an industrial-scale slaughter. I mean, up to 600 men are being killed every single minute.
Which is just a mind-boggling number.
It is. And this isn't, a modern war. There are no machine guns. There are no artillery shells. This is entirely hand-to-hand combat.
Yeah, just men stabbing, slashing, suffocating each other in the dirt.
It is the year 216 BC. And the carnage is so utterly immense that modern historians actively compare the death toll of this single afternoon to the massed slaughter of the British army on the first day of the Battle of the Somme.
Yeah, the Somme in 1916. I mean, it is a genuinely terrifying scene to imagine, and it really perfectly sets the stage for the sources we are exploring today.
Because today we're looking at the Battle of Cannae.
Exactly. It's the defining clash of the Second Punic War, fought between the Roman Republic and, well, the forces of Carthage.
Led by Hannibal.
Right. A man whose name is practically synonymous with military genius.
So the mission for this deep dive is to really understand the mechanics of how this nightmare unfolded. Like, how did an outnumbered army orchestrate the perfect trap?
Yeah, and how Hannibal took Rome's greatest strength and engineered it into a fatal weakness.
Right. And ultimately, we want to explore why military commanders from, World War II all the way to the Gulf War have been completely obsessed with trying to recreate the terrifying perfection of this single afternoon.
Well, to grasp the sheer scale of the disaster waiting for Rome, we have to rewind slightly. We need to look at the psychological state of the Republic leading up to this moment.
Because they were already freaking out.
Oh, completely. By 216 BC, Hannibal had already accomplished the unthinkable. I mean, he had marched his army out of Spain, crossed the Pyrenees, and traversed the Alps into Italy.
Which is wild on its own.
Right. During the late summer and autumn of 218 BC. And he didn't just survive that brutal crossing. He immediately dealt the Romans two humiliating, devastating defeats.
At Trebia and Lake Trasimene. Yeah.
Exactly. So Rome must have been in a state of absolute shock.
Yeah, I know their initial reaction was actually pretty pragmatic, if completely unglamorous.
The Fabian strategy.
Right. They appoint a dictator, a guy named Quintus Fabius Maximus, and he basically invents the strategy of attrition. He just flat out refuses to fight Hannibal in a pitched battle.
Which was smart, honestly.
It was. He cuts off supply lines, shadows the Carthaginian army, and just tries to starve them out.
Yeah.
But the Roman public absolutely hated it.
They despised it.
You can imagine the outrage, right? Hannibal's just wandering around the Italian peninsula, burning farmlands unopposed, and the Roman citizens are demanding a decisive victory.
Yeah, they are terrified that if this inaction continues, all of Rome's allies in Italy will just, defect to Carthage out of self-preservation.
So the political pressure reaches a boiling point.
It does, because the Roman identity was built on martial pride and aggressive action, not hiding behind walls while their fields burn.
Right, that wasn't very Roman of them.
Exactly. So when Fabius's term ends, the Roman Senate decides to do something completely unprecedented. They decide to raise an army of a size never before seen in their history.
Like, how big are we talking?
Well, typically, Rome fielded 4 legions a year. For this campaign, the Senate authorizes 8 legions.
8 legions. So Rome just decides to solve the Hannibal problem by throwing the absolute largest hammer they could forge right at his head.
That's a great way to put it. When you combine the Roman citizens with their allied troops, you are looking at an army of roughly 86,000 men.
Wow.
Yeah, the sources break this down to about 80,000 infantry and around 6,000 cavalry. It is a massive, lumbering juggernaut of a military force.
You basically built a human steamroller.
Yes, a human steamroller.
But here is what confuses me about their setup. With an army of that incredible size, wasn't their command structure a complete mess? Like, I'm trying to understand how you even steer a steamroller that big.
Well, you've hit on a fascinating and fatal flaw in the Roman political system.
Oh.
Yeah. So Rome was a republic that was fundamentally terrified of kings. They had overthrown their monarchy centuries earlier, right?
Right.
And they designed their entire political system so no single man could ever hold absolute military power for too long.
Which makes sense on paper.
Sure, but by trying to prevent a dictator, they accidentally designed an army with a split personality disorder.
Wait, what do you mean?
Because this massive force was essentially 2 consular armies combined into one. And Roman law dictated that the 2 elected consuls had to alternate command day by day,
You're kidding.
Nope. You had Gaius Terentius Varro and Lucius Aemilius Paulus swapping the role of commander-in-chief every 24 hours.
Which means every single day, the entire strategic vision of the army could just flip completely upside down.
Precisely. Now, ancient sources paint Varro as this brash, reckless man of low social standing who was desperate for a fight.
And Paulus.
Paulus is depicted as a cautious, prudent veteran, though we should take that characterization with a grain of salt.
Why is that?
Well, Paulus's grandson later became the primary patron of Polybius, who is one of our main historical sources.
Ah, so there's some serious historical PR spin happening to make Varro the scapegoat.
Exactly. Regardless of their personalities, though, the command structure itself was inherently unstable, and Hannibal knew exactly how to exploit it.
He knew they were swapping.
Yeah. So in the spring of 216 BC, he deliberately forces their hand. He marches in and seizes a massive Roman supply depot at an ancient village called Cannae.
So he puts himself right between the Romans and their food supply.
Yeah.
That is brilliant. He knows they have to come for him now to get those supplies back.
Right.
And on the way there, Varro actually wins a minor skirmish against some of Hannibal's troops, which of course just pumps up his confidence even more.
It's the worst thing that could have happened for Rome, honestly.
Yeah, because Paulus is looking at this wide-open Apulian plain, looking at Hannibal's vastly superior cavalry, and insisting that this flat terrain is a terrible place to fight.
But the momentum is already there.
Exactly. So on August 2nd, which is Varro's day in command, he has this massive 86,000-man army out to face Hannibal.
And here is where we get to the actual deployment, which is just wild to me.
Right, because if Roman doctrine usually features a wide, unified front,
Yeah.
why did they pack everyone so tightly together on this specific day?
It comes back to your steamroller analogy. Varro knew that at the previous Battle of Trebia, Roman heavy infantry had managed to punch straight through Hannibal's center.
Okay.
So he wanted to recreate that exact breakthrough, but on a massive scale. So he completely abandons maneuverability.
He just packs them in.
He packs his individual infantry units incredibly close together, emphasizing immense depth rather than width.
Building a giant, unstoppable human battering ram.
Exactly, meant to shatter the Carthaginian line on the absolute first impact.
But Hannibal is waiting for them.
Yeah.
And his setup is a masterclass in using the environment to neutralize a numerical disadvantage. He only has about 50,000 men.
Right, a huge deficit.
So what does he do? First, he anchors his left flank against the Aufidus River. That instantly means the Romans, despite having tens of thousands more men, cannot stretch their line out and surround him on that side.
It's a natural wall.
Yeah. Then he positions his troops facing west, meaning the Romans have to face east.
And the environmental engineering here is crucial. By forcing the Romans to face east, the low morning sun is shining directly into their eyes as they advance.
That's so smart.
Even worse, he accounts for the prevailing southeasterly wind. It's a local wind called the Vulturnus. He knows it kicks up in the morning.
Oh, no.
So as the Romans march forward, this wind is blowing straight into their lines, carrying thick clouds of sand and dust directly into their faces.
It is the ultimate home field advantage. And he essentially built it himself out of sunlight and dirt.
He really did.
But the really famous part of Hannibal's setup is his infantry line. And this is where I am genuinely baffled, so I need you to explain this. He arranges his men in a crescent shape, bulging outward toward the Roman army.
Right.
He puts his Gallic and Hispanic infantry right in the middle of this outward bulge. And on the far edges of the line, hidden behind the curve, he places his veteran African infantry.
Yeah, the heavy hitters.
But I'm struggling to understand the logic here. If Hannibal knows he's severely outnumbered, why is he putting his men in a bulge pointing right at the Roman steamroller? That seems like he's just handing the Romans the exact point of impact they want.
Well, it looks like suicide on paper. I mean, for a long time, historians believed Roman sources that claimed Hannibal put his weakest, most expendable troops in the center.
Like cannon fodder.
Exactly, essentially offering them up to slow down the Romans. But modern analysis entirely reframes this. Those Gauls and Iberians in the center were not weak or unreliable.
They weren't.
No, they were highly battle-hardened veterans. We know this because Hannibal placed himself and his brother Mago right there in the very center, standing shoulder to shoulder with them.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you definitely do not put yourself at the tip of the spear if you expect the spear to instantly shatter.
No, you don't. Their job was actually the most physically and psychologically demanding on the entire battlefield.
What do they have to do?
They had to take the full, terrifying, crushing impact of the Roman heavy infantry, engage them in brutal combat, and then perform a controlled fighting retreat without breaking ranks.
That sounds impossible.
It almost is. They had to absorb the momentum of 80,000 men and slowly bend backward, step by bloody step.
Okay, so the board is fully set. The giant Roman battering ram is marching forward, blinded by dust and sun, right toward this crescent of Carthaginian warriors.
Yeah.
But the battle actually kicks off on the wings with the cavalry. And the sources describe this as incredibly brutal.
Oh, it was savage.
Polybius notes that on the flank near the river, the space was so tight that the Hispanic and Celtic horsemen were actually dismounting. They were fighting the Roman cavalry on foot.
Which is just terrifying to picture.
Polybius literally calls it a barbaric struggle because of its sheer savagery. There was no quarter given, just men hacking at each other in the mud.
And this cavalry engagement on the wings is the trigger mechanism for the entire trap.
How so?
So Hannibal's cavalry commander on the left, a man named Hasdrubal, completely crushes the Roman right wing. But here is where the discipline is just staggering.
What does he do?
Instead of chasing the fleeing Romans blindly off the battlefield, which was incredibly common in ancient warfare, where soldiers just wanted to hunt down survivors for loot, Hasdrubal keeps his men under absolute control.
He stops them.
Yes. He wheels them around the back of the Roman army and charges into the rear of the allied cavalry on the opposite side.
Oh, man.
Sending them running, too. So within a very short time, Hannibal's cavalry has completely cleared the field of Roman horsemen. The Roman flanks are entirely stripped of protection.
Meanwhile, in the center, the jaws of the trap are opening.
Yes.
The Roman heavy infantry crashes into that bulging crescent of Gauls and Iberians. And just like Hannibal planned, the center begins to yield. They step backward, still fighting, slowly reversing the crescent from a bulge pointing out to a U-shape bowing inward.
And the Romans think they are winning.
Exactly. They push deeper and deeper into the center. I was thinking about it, and it's like a giant Chinese finger trap for an entire army. The harder the Romans push forward, desperate to break the line, the tighter the trap locked around them.
The Chinese finger trap is the perfect way to visualize it. As the Romans surged into that growing pocket, their massive numerical advantage actually became the instrument of their doom.
Because they're getting squished.
Right. The troops in the rear lines kept pushing forward into the gaps, compressing the Roman ranks tighter and tighter together. And because of that Volturnus wind blowing dust in their faces, combined with the sheer tunnel vision of Mortal Kombat, the Romans completely failed to notice those veteran African troops.
The ones Hannibal had stationed on the far edges of his line.
Exactly.
If you put yourself in the middle of that Roman block for a second, the dusk is blinding you. You're being pushed violently forward by your own men from behind, and you think you were driving the enemy back.
You feel like you're winning.
You don't realize you have essentially marched into a narrow alleyway made entirely of enemy soldiers. And then Hannibal springs the trap. He orders those uncommitted African veterans to wheel inward.
Hitting them from the sides.
Yep. They strike the Roman steamroller perfectly on the left and right flanks.
This is one of the earliest and honestly, arguably the most flawless recorded examples of a double envelopment or pincer movement in Western military history.
It's textbook.
Yeah. The Romans are suddenly hit from both sides by fresh, heavily armed troops. Their forward momentum is violently halted. And at that exact moment, Hasdrubal's victorious cavalry returns from chasing off the Roman horsemen and smashes directly into the rear of the Roman infantry.
The jaws snap shut.
Yep.
The Romans are completely encircled. They are packed in so tightly that, according to the sources, they literally did not have the physical space to draw their swords or lift their shields.
They become just a massive, helpless block of humanity.
So what happens next?
Well, what follows ceases to be a battle. It becomes a systematic, methodical massacre.
God.
The Carthaginians simply formed a solid wall around the pocket and began cutting their way inward. The psychological horror of being in the center of that mass, hearing the slaughter getting closer and closer, knowing you cannot even raise your arms to defend yourself, is unimaginable.
The statistics are chilling. Remember that summer afternoon I mentioned at the start? This is where it happens. Over the next few hours, surrounded and exhausted, the Romans are butchered. Livy estimates 48,200 Romans were killed. Polybius puts the number even higher, at 70,000 dead.
Which is where military historian Victor Davis Hansen gets the math of nearly 600 legionaries slaughtered every single minute until the sun finally set.
There is this incredibly gruesome, haunting detail from Livy. He wrote that the next morning when the Carthaginians were looting the bodies, they found some Roman soldiers who were still alive but trapped under the dead.
And what did they do?
Rather than wait to be stabbed, they had literally dug holes in the dirt with their bare hands, buried their own faces, and suffocated themselves.
Wow. It speaks to a level of profound despair that is just hard for us to fathom.
Absolutely.
And the political devastation for Rome was just as severe as the military loss. Consul Paulus, the cautious commander who did not even want to fight on that plain, is killed in the slaughter. Alongside him, Rome loses 2 quaestors, 29 military tribunes, and a staggering 80 senators.
80 senators.
Right. To put that in perspective, quaestors managed the treasury and logistics, and tribunes were the senior military officers. That was a massive chunk of Rome's entire governing body. It's like the ancient equivalent of the Pentagon and Congress being wiped out in a single afternoon.
So we have to look at the psychological fallout. When the news hits the city of Rome, there is utter, unprecedented panic. They completely abandon their own laws out of sheer terror.
They limit the official mourning period to just 30 days.
Yeah, and they ban women from crying in public because the wailing in the streets is destroying what little morale is left. The Senate is so desperate they consult the Sibylline books.
Right, these ancient cryptic prophecies that were only ever opened in times of apocalyptic crisis.
Exactly. The Romans become so convinced the gods have abandoned them that they resort to human sacrifice. They literally take 4 people and bury them alive in the Forum Boarium, the city's main cattle market, to appease the gods. It is absolute apocalyptic terror.
While Rome is spiraling into that panic, you have to picture the contrasting scene back in Carthage.
I bet they were celebrating.
Oh, yeah. Hannibal sends his brother Mago to report the victory to the Carthaginian Senate, and to physically prove the scale of the slaughter, Mago pours out a massive pile of golden rings onto the Senate floor.
Wait, rings?
Yeah. Every single one of those rings was taken from the finger of a dead Roman knight or senator. It was a visual representation of Rome's decimated elite.
Okay, wait. If you just wiped out the ancient equivalent of the Pentagon and Congress, and the entire city is burying people in the cattle market out of terror, why didn't Carthage just march in and take the keys to the city? Like, why are we sitting here today talking about a Roman Empire instead of a Carthaginian one?
Well, this brings us to a legendary confrontation right on the blood-soaked battlefield. Hannibal's cavalry commander, a guy named Hannibal, urges Hannibal to pack up the army, ride hard, and march immediately on the city of Rome itself.
Makes sense. Go for the throat.
But Hannibal refuses, and Hannibal looks at him and delivers this legendary critique. Oh, assuredly, no one man has been blessed with all God's gifts. You, Hannibal, know how to gain a victory. You do not know how to use it.
Ouch. That is quite the quote.
That quote has fueled debates for 2 millennia. Even Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery in the 20th century sided with Hannibal, arguing that Hannibal missed his one and only shot to win the war.
Really?
Yeah, but we have to look at the mechanical reality of ancient warfare to defend Hannibal's logic here.
Fair enough. What was stopping him?
As historians at Hans Delbrück have pointed out, Hannibal's army was simply not equipped to march on a heavily fortified city like Rome. They were exhausted. They had just taken around 6,000 to 8,000 casualties themselves.
Right.
And crucially, they completely lacked the specialized siege equipment. The towers, the battering rams, the stuff needed to breach the massive walls of Rome.
Right. You can't just knock on the heavy wooden gates of Rome and expect them to politely open up.
Exactly. That is the core of it. Hannibal's grand strategy was never to burn the city of Rome to the ground. His strategy was political. He wanted to break the Republic by stripping away its allies.
Them isolated.
He believed that by causing so much carnage on the battlefield, the Italian city-states would realize Rome couldn't protect them and would defect to Carthage.
And did that work?
Initially, his logic held up. After Cannae, massive, wealthy city-states like Capua and Tarentum defected. Even Philip V of Macedon pledged support to Hannibal.
Wow. But Hannibal underestimated one crucial irrational variable, right? The sheer stubborn resilience of the Roman Republic.
Absolutely.
Despite losing roughly 1/5 of their entire adult male population over just 20 months of war, Rome flat out refuses to surrender. Hannibal actually sends a delegation to negotiate a peace treaty, and the Roman Senate refuses to even let them inside the city.
They wouldn't even talk to them.
No. They refuse his offer to ransom the thousands of prisoners he took. Instead, they double down. They draft underage boys. They enlist landless peasants. They even purchase and arm thousands of slaves to form new legions.
That unyielding resilience is perfectly captured in the story about a young Roman tribune who survived the battle.
What happened?
He fled to a nearby town with some other refugees, and several of the surviving Roman nobles were so demoralized they were actively planning to flee Italy entirely and become mercenaries for foreign kings.
Just abandon Rome.
Yeah. But this young tribune, Publius Cornelius Scipio, bursts into their meeting with his sword drawn. He holds the naked blade over their heads and forces them to swear a blood oath that they will never abandon Rome.
Or else.
If they refuse, he promises to kill them right there on the spot.
Scipio is absolutely a name to remember, because 14 years later, he is the very general who finally defeats Hannibal at the Battle of Zama, ending the war.
Talk about coming full circle.
Right. But the legacy of Cannae didn't end with the Second Punic War. It fundamentally rewired how human beings fought wars.
It absolutely did. Rome learned a harsh, blood-soaked lesson at Cannae. They realized that their massive, rigid blocks of infantry, which acted almost like a Greek phalanx, a solid wall of men that could only move straight ahead, were far too vulnerable to flanking maneuvers.
Because they couldn't turn fast enough.
Exactly. They lacked the ability to turn or adapt. So over the next century, this catastrophic failure drove the evolution of the Roman military. They eventually developed the cohort system.
How does that work?
Instead of one massive wall, the army was broken down into smaller, independent checkerboard squares that could detach, pivot, and plug gaps dynamically on the battlefield. Cannae forced Rome to invent military flexibility.
And beyond Rome, Cannae became the ultimate obsession for military commanders. For over 2,000 years, the cane model became a byword for military perfection.
The holy grail of tactics.
Exactly. The idea of totally encircling and annihilating an enemy army in a single stroke became the gold standard. General Alfred von Schlieffen, the chief of the German General Staff before World War I, basically designed the famous Schlieffen Plan, inspired directly by the mechanics of Hannibal's double envelopment.
And it goes even further than that.
Really?
Yeah, even General Norman Schwarzkopf explicitly cited Cannae as his inspiration for the coalition operations during the 1991 Gulf War.
That is wild, 2,000 years later.
It remains the archetypal battle of annihilation. Dwight D. Eisenhower himself wrote that every ground commander tries to duplicate the classic example of Cannae whenever conditions permit. It is studied in every military academy in the world as the absolute pinnacle of tactical art.
Well, it leaves you with a fascinating question to apply not just to history, but to our modern world.
What's that?
I mean, Hannibal executed the single most flawless tactical masterpiece in human history. He annihilated his enemy completely. Yet 14 years later, Carthage lost the war, and Rome reigned supreme.
It's true.
Think about modern equivalents, from aggressive corporate takeovers that entirely bankrupt the buyer, to modern political campaigns that win the election but divide the country beyond the ability to actually govern.
Winning the battle, losing the war.
Exactly. When you pursue total, absolute annihilation of your opponent, does the sheer cost of achieving that perfect victory inherently guarantee that you will lose the peace?
That's a profound way to look at it.
It is something to keep in mind the next time you picture a sunny summer afternoon and an army of 86,000 men marching into a trap of their own making.